Could you talk a little bit about how you see your current job and what it is that the board has asked you to do at Carnival?
The Carnival Group is 5 corporations, 5 operating companies, 10 brands, and they all operate completely independent of each other. And the idea was, when they were small, that our entrepreneurial spirits would be more effective than trying to unify and operate as a single entity. And that was true. But now we're 103 ships, we're 50% of the industry, and it's very easy for us to step on each other's toes and do things that are counterproductive for the organization. And we don't take advantage of our scale. Mm-hmm. We're one of the largest purchasers of air in the world, and yet none of the airlines know that, because it's 10 different purchasers buying that air. Mm-hmm. So huge opportunities. My job is to, 1, make the company safer. I'm running the marine and technical operations. 2, take advantage of our scale and leverage. Rethink our revenue strategy. So I'm unfortunately in charge of the top line and all the lines in between. And then also to build a strategy to create a portfolio of brands rather than 5 separate or 10 separate companies that all are running off in their own direction. Well, the first thing is to begin to change the culture.
Change the culture.
You've got to get all of the, we started with the 7, there's 7 of us that are in the leadership team. We met off-site and worked through what we thought was the right strategy for the enterprise, which included all this change. All the CEOs of the brands have, in theory, bought into this concept. And then we brought their next level in and did the same thing with them with an off-site to make sure that they were aligned with their bosses, which isn't always the case. You know, that you're not, what your boss thinks is the right strategy isn't necessarily what you think. And we've coalesced on what we believe are the key strategies that we have to embrace as a corporation. The first project that we've gotten traction on and we've reached a point where we're now ready to implement has to do with kind of an arcane area, which is crew air. We fly all of our crew to and from our ships. It's part of their compensation. Every brand does it differently. Most of them do it very poorly. We've estimated there's $50 million that we can save by just doing it smart. But that means every brand has to change the way they do business. And so while everyone embraces the 50 million and everyone embraces the idea of doing it smarter, nobody's real excited about changing the way they do business. You know, we're in many ways, Carnival's a family business. The Arison family has, at one time, 50% of the company. Now they have around 30%. So obviously the owner's perspective is and he is the chair, remains the chair, is very critical to the success of the company and the board. The lead director had proposed doing a search, and the chair was adamant that he wanted somebody he knew and trusted. He didn't want to bring a exogenous factor into the organization at a critical time in its maturation. And so there was a board member that he felt strongly was the most capable, had the right profile for the age and experience, and he had faith in him, and wasn't sure he would take the job. So it was a little bit unusual. I think pulling from the board to replace the CEO is relatively unusual.
Of course, you've had a great run at Princess, but the entire Carnival family has had a few hiccups to deal with.
Right.
How do you see those, how do you assess the kind of response from the boardroom to those kind of challenges?
Safety has to be our first priority. It is my first priority. It's a process to get people to focus on the big things and the fact that as a corporation we can't have multiple standards. for the safe operation of our vessels. We have to have one standard.
So with safety at the top of your list, there's always a question of costs, and you obviously have to then worry about profitabilities. And how do you, what kind of trade-off are you making? Is this board prepared
When it comes
say,
to safety, there's no issue on cost.
Okay.
No.
But
Not with me. If it becomes an issue, I'm gone. I took this course that you're all on in 2011 because I was going to be appointed to the board of Avalon Bay, which is a real estate investment trust for multifamily. They build apartment buildings. They're the number 2 REIT in the U.S. And in the 3 years I've been there, we've had a CEO replacement, a CFO replacement. We've acquired a firm almost half our size, a very complex transaction that involved 2 REITs buying a 3rd REIT out of bankruptcy and splitting it. Our board, we have a number of board members that have been on for 15 or more years, and we need to roll them off. Not so much in the U.S., but I'm on the Carnival. I'm not on the board, but I'm part of the Carnival group, and we're a dual-listed company, British and U.S. And in Britain, if you're on the board for more than 10 years, you're not considered independent any longer. You've become part of the Borg. You're part of the team, and so we're wrestling with that, trying to bring diversity, not just protected classes, but also diversity of thought. People with IT backgrounds, marketing backgrounds. The tendency is to pick CEOs, but one can argue that CEOs aren't always the most appropriate board members. I mean, I'm not saying categorically they're not, but there are times when you can reach further into the organization and pick more appropriate members for your board. And then one of the critical components that I think often ISS and other organizations miss is that there's a certain chemistry that makes boards work. And picking the right individual that's going to meld into the team, not so much that they're going to acquiesce to the decisions of the other board members, but they're going to be an active and comfortable member that's going to feel comfortable debating and arguing and taking contra positions, which often in boards doesn't happen. We have one woman on the board. Real estate's a very male-dominated business for reasons that escape me. And so trying to find a diverse board, because the diversity of thought is so valuable to any team, any group, and bringing people together that have similar backgrounds, you tend to become monolithic, and that's the worst thing that can happen to a board. Ultimately, so in theory you might do one thing, but in practice you have to look at the individual. It's not so much about theoretically what's the best thing to do. It's we have this person who is the CEO. Should he become the chairman? And what are the implications of him becoming the chairman versus ultimately one of us becoming the chairman? And I think one of the board members put it very succinctly, well, if we don't elevate him to chair, which one of us is going to take that role? And who wants that role? And which of you believe that you're going to do a better job than he? Because it's not a question of who's going to do a better job than the CEO, a CEO. It's this CEO. We know him now. He's been here a year. Is he going to do an adequate or better job than any one of us? And ultimately, we decided that he was a better candidate than we were.
As we've grappled with how to present that issue, and as you know, the data shows an increasing tendency of larger companies to support the notion of keeping the chair and the CEO the same. It ticked up this year for the first time after a decline of about 8 years, and it's back up now to 34%, going in the direction of keeping it as one person.
There's a certain emotional aspect of mergers and acquisitions that has to be guarded against, because you start talking about them and you can talk yourself into anything, and you tend to look at the positives and downplay the negatives, and once you get down the path, if stuff starts to happen and aspects of the transaction began to erode. There's a tendency to forget about, it's like we've got sunk costs, so we have to continue, which is, a huge fallacy that you have to, sunk costs are just, they're sunk and forget about them. And so the board was very conscientious at every step of the way to make sure that we weren't being lured into a decision based on our emotional desire to complete the transaction that months ago we decided was a good idea.
What gets your attention in the boardroom?
Risk.
Risk, enterprise risk?
Enterprise risk, and I think a lot of boards struggle with particularly IT risk. And as we become more IT-centric, and particularly more mobile, or have more mobile applications, understanding the risks we take as an enterprise, I think boards struggle with getting their arms around it. Audit committees struggle with trying to understand just what are the risks inherent, because there's so many, especially in a variegated organization that has lots of applications. Just where are the risks, and how capable is the IA group in identifying them and ferreting them out, or the IT group. And so that's one that keeps you up at night, wondering about just, if I know a risk, then I can help direct management to make sure that they're covering it. But if I'm not aware of it, then that's the scariest part. Everyone has sort of a Pollyanna point of view that, we're doing it, we have good people and they're very concerned and they're doing the right things. But my personal perspective is the bad guys are talented and they're relentless. They're just all the time trying to find vulnerabilities, and if they find them, a third of them are looking for some kind of economic value. The other 2/3 are just looking to tweak you publicly, and so either way you lose. So risk is identifying and managing risk is my biggest concern.
And you make that and that's the issue of the whole board, not
Well,
just the
typically the audit committee
is start off with the IT risk,
but
is the audit committee.
But I think the boards I'm on, the entire board
Takes it on.
worries about it. Yeah.
Yeah.